Connexion.
Good evening. This is Guillaume Drouin. I'm happy to be with you again tonight. We continue our educational program. Tonight the topic is, as a subject I really love, we're going to talk about aging the Calvados. There's plenty of things to tell about how to age a Calvados. I think it's actually one of the specialty of Christian Drouin Estate, or actually a subject we have worked a lot. So I'm very happy to share with you tonight some information on how we work here. The different points I would like to mention tonight are the following. The first one is how to age a Calvados in the best possible way. And then I'm going to concentrate and try to describe on what is an aging, what happens in the cask during the aging. And then after that we will check different blends. I will explain to you the way we make these different blends and how here at Christian Drouin we work all the aging process and the cask management. So you know, last week I told you about La Blanche, which is an unaged eau de vie. You remember, it comes out from the still white. It's a lot of great perfume of fresh apple when the Calvados comes out from the still. And well, the idea of aging this eau de vie is to bring more complexity, to bring more structure, to get this eau de vie rounder, softer and more complex at the same time. But what is also very important is that we never want to lose this fruity character, which is the definition of Calvados. Apple as the base of our spirit. We are very lucky to work with a fruit that has a lot of flavors, which is really aromatic. And so the challenge of aging the Calvados is how you bring this complexity, how you bring wood to the spirit without losing the fresh and lively character of the apple and the pear. There's a way I like to sum up the aging with actually three simple things. The first one is everything which happens in the cask between the oak and the Calvados. The cask, of course, is made of oak, and the oak is going to react with the Calvados. The second thing I will develop later is the contact between the Calvados and air, the oxidation. And the last point is evaporation. But let's come back on the first point. Contact with wood and Calvados. So the oak is going to give color to the Calvados at first. You know, the spirit is white at first, and year after year the color is going to change. It's going to get slightly golded, and after 10 years it's going to get amber, and it can end like a very brown amber color for an old Calvados. Most important is all the flavors and the tannins that the cask will deliver to the Calvados. The tannins of the cask can be of a lot of different kinds. Some tannins are very bitter, some are astringent, some are silky, smooth or round. So there are a lot of different styles of tannins, and we really try to get the best quality of tannins when selecting the cask. The tannins will make the structure of the Calvados. It will give the Calvados its body and its character. The flavors. Each barrel is going to bring different flavors. And these flavors will come year after year. It's a very slow process. Aging a Calvados can be extremely long. We age some Calvados here more than 50 years. As an example, you actually have here an eau de vie which is from 1948. So this is in cask since 1948. As you can calculate, it's now 72 years that this eau de vie is in the cask and continue to age and to change. So I really think we can make very long aging on Calvados because it's a spirit that stands a very long aging. So going back to the flavors and what the cask give to the Calvados. if it's a young cask, it will give more flavors, more structure, more tannins, more quickly, but not the most delicate. So here at Christian Drouin, we actually don't work with new cask. I don't like new cask. I think the tannins are too green, they are too powerful, and they tend to overtake the fruit. So we work with second-hand casks that were used before for either some spirits, like cognac, very often. They can be from a wine cask, Bordeaux wine cask. In that case, we don't use the cask strictly after the wine, but we will clean the cask first. The cooper will open it, clean it, toast it again, and then we will use it for Calvados. We can also use former fortified wine cask, like port cask, sherry cask, banyuls, which are kind of casks that we really like using here at Christian Drouin.
The 48 cask looks young, isn't it?
The cask here is about 10 years old, or maybe 15 years old, but we change actually our spirit from a cask to another very often during its aging. So the cask can be young, but the spirit can be 72 years. On average, here, once every 2 years, we will remove the Calvados from one cask to another. The oldest casks we have in our cellar are about 100 years old. And the youngest are going to be like 3 years old, because as I said, we don't like using new cask.
Isn't this young cask not too aggressive for the 48 vintage?
Well, it's not a fresh cask. It's a cask which is about 15 years old. So I would consider this already as an old cask in what it gives to the Calvados. When the cask is 15 years, it goes for a very slow aging, delicate tannins and not much flavors and wood together. So it's actually well adapted to such an old spirit. So the age of the cask is indeed a very important fact. As I mentioned, the origin of the cask. A port cask is going to bring rancio, a round character. The sherry cask gives the spices, a buttery style to the Calvados, something creamy and very round and smooth tannins. A cognac cask is going to bring flowers, very delicate tannins. So it is very interesting for us to work with casks from different origin. Each cask brings something different to the Calvados. And as I said, during the aging, the Calvados will move from cask to cask. For us, it's actually a lot of work that we mainly do on Excel files. And you know, we taste every barrels we have in the cellar, and we have about 1,200 barrels to taste every year. And that's a job we do, my father and I. And from these tastings, we take notes and we try to understand what these Calvados are best for and how we can continue to improve them. So some Calvados, some casks will be selected to be blended and sold during the year. Some will be selected for longer aging, and we will take decisions such as, do we change the Calvados from another to another cask this year or not? How fast do we reduce the Calvados? And these are single decisions which are taken for every cask individually. So it's a lot of work, but I really believe that's the only way to really do a good job on aging. So the origin of the cask, as we said, has a strong influence, so as the age, but the size of the cask also is very important. You see in this room, we only have 225 liters, well, except this one, which is a bit smaller. But that's quite a regular size, 225 liters. We also work with some casks which are bigger, 2,000 liters, for instance. We call that foudre. And the food will make a slower aging, and so it's very interesting for some old Calvados when the structure is good and we want to go for a slower evolution. Most of the casks we use are small because there are more interaction in a small cask than a big one, and that's what we are looking for during the aging process.
How could you control the tannin extracted from the cask to the spirit?
Mainly by tasting and by removing the Calvados from a cask to another. If you have a young cask, it will bring more tannins. You actually have two things that happens together in the spirit. One is the extraction of the tannins into the Calvados, and this goes with a certain speed. And the other thing is the oxidation of these tannins, and this oxidation is going to soften the tannins. So if you have a cask that delivers a lot of tannins, but not enough oxidation, you're going to have the feeling of a lot of wood and fresh wood on the tongue when you taste a Calvados, which is not something you want. The contrary is possible. You can have a lot of oxidation, but nearly no structuring agent from the cask. And so the game is to move the Calvados from cask which has structuring to cask which will enable oxidation at the good moment during the aging process.
Have you already tried to age your Calvados under a tropical climate, for example? But I think it's forbidden.
Yeah, it would be forbidden actually, indeed. The Calvados have to be aged in Normandy. We made one experimentation a few years ago. It was not a tropical climate, it was actually the contrary. We have aged some Calvados in Bristol, in London, in England, and we made early landed Calvados. There were 8 casks made that way, and they were the only 8 casks ever made as early landed Calvados. And it was very interesting because in England, the Calvados were aged in a very mild and very humid cellar, and the aging was very different from what we get here in Normandy. But we haven't tried yet in tropical climate. Maybe one day it can be something funny to do, but then the Calvados would be called an eau de vie de cidre, not a Calvados. So the choice of the cask, as we said, is extremely important. We mentioned the size, the origin, the age of the cask. On every cask we figure some information. Here you see we have 191 liters in the cask. This Calvados is at 57% alcohol, and that's a vintage from 2008. This cask is 225 liters, and it's only 190 liters inside. This one is only 193 liters. So as you can see, most of our casks are not completely full. The reason why we do that is actually we like to have more oxidation, and we like to have more evaporation. Oxidation is very important. It transforms the flavors, it softens the tannins. And so sometimes we even aerate the Calvados to get more of this oxidation. The evaporation, which is called angel share, is also very efficient on the aging. In a cellar like here, we lose almost 4% in a year because we use small casks, because the casks are not completely full. The average in Normandy is more about 2% evaporation a year. But the more the Calvados evaporates, the rounder, the smoother it gets, and the more concentrated as well. Because what evaporates at first is all the aggressivity of the spirit. So it's very important to have evaporation. I always say there is no good aging if you don't have enough evaporation. It would be a mistake to try to avoid it.
Do you also keep some Calvados in something else than a cask? Maybe damjan or bonbon or any recipient?
When the vintage get very old, and if we have very small volume left, too small to be held in a cask, then we can decide to put it either in a glass component like a damjan, or sometimes we will store them in stainless steel. We're just waiting to be bottled. But it's something we don't do on a regular basis. We really try to keep all our Calvados in cask until they bottle. So this evaporation is very important. It concentrates the spirit, and it gives it length and strength and a smoother character. We try to help this evaporation. We have a very high evaporation rate at Christian Drouin, and I think this is one of the reasons why I believe some of our Calvados has both this strong personality, a lot of character, but something very elegant and smooth on the final at the same time. This is, I think, due to this high evaporation rate. We taste all the casks every year. I mentioned that earlier. When we move the Calvados from cask to cask, that's a lot of work. We also do blendings. The idea of a blend is to create every year the same style of Calvados. It's also a way to get a better balance and a great consistency in the blend. Every blend has its own recipe and its own way of being aged and made. I'm going to show you a first one, which is here. This is Sélection Calvados. So this is the youngest blend we have in the range. It's a Calvados which is only 2 years old, and Sélection is a very original and interesting blend because it's made with a lot of pear. We actually produce this blend from the region of Domfront in the south of Normandy, a region where we grow more pear than apples. And here we use about 30% of pear in the blend, 70% of apple, and this Calvados is made with a column distillation, so it's a single distillation. The single distillation makes a very straightforward style, whereas the double distillation tends to make a rounder spirit, a smoother spirit. But the column distillation has one great quality. It makes a very lively nose with a very outcoming expression, a bright nose, very much on the fruit. And that's what we try to do here. You see this Calvados as 2 to 4 years old, but it's nearly white, you know, there's very little color. We don't try to get color here, we don't try to get structure. This Calvados was only aged in a very old cask. And all we want to do here is underline a little bit the structure, but mainly keep all the fresh fruit. And that's the style of this Sélection Calvados.
Is this Calvados mainly for making cocktails?
It's a perfect Calvados for cocktails. A lot of bartenders work with it because of these very intense fresh fruit flavors, because of the higher acidity due to the pear and the column distillation. So yeah, it's perfect for making cocktails. If we have some bartenders with us tonight, do not hesitate to share some recipes you like doing with Sélection.
And Jaroslav asks, what is your oldest Calvados ever made at Christian Drouin Distillery?
The oldest eau de vie we have is this one from 1948, which is still aging, so it's 72 years old. The oldest vintage we have in the cellar is from 1939, but it was bottled in 86. And so these are actually some collection we purchased from other producers in the region, because my grandfather only started producing in the 60s. So these very, very old stocks actually come from different farms. We purchased their production because we thought the quality was super, and then we continue aging the Calvados in our own way. So Sélection, straightforward, a lot of fruit, good acidity, a vibrant and easy Calvados. It's good for cocktails, but it's also, I think, a perfect introduction to Calvados, you know, for someone who wants to discover the fruity character of the Calvados. Sélection is a great choice. Now we're gonna continue the description with another blend, the VSOP. VSOP, as how could I say that? For me, it's a little bit like my everyday Calvados. It's a very easy blend. It's very accessible. It's a blend we make with Calvados from 5 to 12 years. And it was aged in many different casks. If you watch the color, you see we have a color which is already much more amber. And this Calvados was mainly aged in former Bordeaux wine cask. These casks, before we use them for Calvados, we give them to the cooper. He opens the cask, he's going to clean the cask, he's going to toast the cask again, and then we can use them for Calvados. So yeah, most of the aging was made in this kind of cask, and then about 10% of the blend is also aged in fortified wine cask. We use port, sherry, and Banyuls mainly. The fortified wine cask brings rancio, a bit of complexity, you know, something more on the final of the Calvados. The Bordeaux wine cask we use, which was quite young, they are casks from 3 to 10 years, are very efficient for bringing flavors such as vanilla, a nice round structure to it. And so what is really enjoyable here is that we still have a lot of fruit. It's not anymore the very fresh fruit we had on the Sélection. It's more like a ripe apple now. And this is now combined with flavors like vanilla, a bit of cinnamon, and the mouse. Well, the mouse is much rounder than the Sélection. So we've got something nice and smooth and round. And so you see already 4 different kind of casks used to make these blend. When I say we use Calvados which are from 5 to 12 years, the reason why we do that is because, you know, the casks change, the Calvados change, and it's nearly impossible to make the same blend every year. So we use quite a large range of age so that we still able to make the same taste year after year. But to be able to do that, we have to work with quite a large range of possible ages. You know, some year the base of the VSOP might be a 7 or 8 years old Calvados, another year it might be 5 years old. Some year we'll put a very limited percentage of 12 years, and some others will put more, really depending on how we taste the different cask and how we are able to remake this very specific style, which is ripe apple, vanilla, smooth and around spirit. We move to the other one. XO. XO means extra old. The VSOP means very special old pale, and XO is for extra old. The XO is legally a blend of Calvados over 6 years. We mainly use Calvados from 8 to 15 years to make our XO. We do the same kind of aging on the XO as for the VSOP, but we also use a little bit of former cognac cask here. And these bring more flowers and very delicate tannins. The color is a little bit darker. Now at the nose, what is very interesting from the VSOP to the XO is that now we get to this oxidative flavor group. We get flavors like almond, a little bit of nuts, and a bit of dry apricot. And these are flavors from the oxidation. That's really the impact of the air on the spirit, on the Calvados. The apple is not anymore fresh. It's not even ripe apple anymore. We're now in a baked apple. This evolution is due to the oxidation. When you get the fresh spirit from the still, it's the fresh fruit. And year after year, because of the oxidation, these flavors of fresh apple turns to ripe apple, and then to baked apples, to apple jam, and finally at the end you get dry fruits. So that's a normal evolution in a Calvados due to the contact with air during the aging process. So at that stage on the XO, we start to have a little bit of rancio, of oxidation, and the apple is like a very ripe, even baked apple here.
So are the different appellation like VSOP, XO, categories protected as in cognac or just followed by choice?
They have a legal definition. VSOP is minimum 4 years. XO in Calvados is minimum 6 years, whereas now in cognac it's minimum 10. But in Calvados it's still 6 years old minimum. So there are minimum ages, but there are no maximum. And for instance, in our hordage, we have a blend of Calvados over 15 years, but the legal definition of hordage is 6 years. But at Christian Drouin, we've always made the hordage with Calvados over 15 years old. That's a great age. Hordage is really a super Calvados. I've always heard my father saying that, you know, people would judge a house of Calvados on their hordage. It's a flagship for many distilleries. So it's really a blend on which we all pay a lot of attention. To make our hordage, we have used mainly old Calvados cask and also some former cognac cask. So it's quite a classic aging here. No fortified wine cask, pretty old cask. So we know we go for quite a slow aging because we have time, because this Calvados is going to spend at least 15 years in the cask, but it can actually spend more time than that. The Ardage is a blend from 15 to 20, 25 years sometime. Some year we do that, and here now it's really exciting. You know, I believe myself that we really start to get the very best Calvados from 20 years old. At that age, there's a super balance between the fruit, the spices, the flowers, a great complexity. Now we have dry fruits, a lot of spices, very flowery character. I would love this, you know, after dinner. That's a very classical digestive. A Calvados like the VSOP, you can have it in many different ways. It's raw and fruity and lighter, so you know it's great as an aperitif. It's great with cheese. I really suggest you try to match a good Calvados like VSOP with some Normandy cheese like Camembert or Olivaro will even do better. You can try blue cheese, you can try many kind of very fat and tasty cheese, such as those that we make in France, like Epoisse or other cheese like that. That's a great combination. Calvados can be married with dessert, a good apple pie as a perfect match with a great Calvados. So you know, these are different suggestions on how to enjoy it. But the best way is the way you like. Everybody has different taste. Are there any more questions on how we age the Calvados, on how we make these blends? I'm going to show you a little trick before we finish this session. The trick is on how to well aerate a Calvados.
Dominique Hutin has joined us.
Hello Dominique, good evening. Hope you're fine. Okay, so just a little trick to show you how to aerate a Calvados. Of course, it's not a wine, so no need to shake the glass. If you do that, you will only burn your nose. My advice is just gently turn the glass. You do like this, so that you have Calvados all around your glass. And then you wait a little bit and you watch the tears. And when you see the tears, or the legs, the way you want to call it, halfway down on the glass, look at this here. Okay, now I am halfway, so that's perfect. I can slowly bring this glass to my nose and wait for the flavors to come one after the other. No need to shake the glass any more than that. And that's really the good way to get all the complexity at one nose. Because you know, in a glass of Calvados you have some very light flavors that will come out quickly, some very heavy flavors. If you shake too hard, you just burn your nose with the alcohol and get the very volatile flavors out. If you wait too long, it's the contrary, you will just get the heavy flavors. But that's the good technique. And that's what we use, you know, when we make the blends. We have like 40, 50 different samples on the table. The first thing I do is I just smell all of them, and I take all the glasses and I turn them like this, put them back. I do that, all of them in a row like this, and then I come back and I smell. And that's without shaking the glass anymore. And that's really the good way to get the flavors.
And by the way, do you also bottle single cask sometime?
We do single cask. We have a range which is dedicated to that, called Calvados Expression. So on that range, we like to play with funny aging. So we have Banyuls, we have Tokai, we have rum cask from La Réunion Island, from Savannah. We have so we do a lot of interesting aging, and we bottle them as single cask and state all the information, the way it was aged, the number of bottles, etc. on the labels. Actually, the next very interesting project to come out very soon is going to be a Calvados which was aged in former rum cask from Jamaica, from Hamden. So it's going to be a 14 years old cask with an 8 months finish in the Hamden cask. It's a super interesting Calvados. We cannot call it a Calvados because it was aged in American oak, and one of the rules for Calvados is that we have to use French oak, so it will be sold as an eau de vie this year, but it was a Calvados until it got into the Hamden cask, and that's something really interesting with a lot of tropical flavors, ripe banana, tobacco, black pepper, and so this will be on the market very soon. So yeah, we do single cask bottlings from time to time, because you know that's fun, it's very interesting, and I think it's interesting also to explain the impact of every different kind of cask on the Calvados.
Question from Yves Constantino: how do you approach dilution? Especially for older Calvados.
Very good question, and I forgot to mention that.
Slow, gradual, slow proofing, like cognac houses?
Exactly. When the Calvados comes up from the still at 70%, because of the evaporation, it's gonna lose alcohol, but it's a very slow process. So you know, after 10 years, if you don't add any water in the Calvados, you will go from 70% to 66%. We lose about 0.4% in a year. That's about it. So there are, I think, no real cask strength on the market. All the cask strength you see, they have been reduced at the time, and then they are finally bottled at the degree of the cask. But there was some reduction sometime during the aging process. Otherwise, they're going to be like 60, above 60% alcohol. Now, most of our blends are bottled at 40 or 42%. So what we do in between is we add water. The water we use is a filtered water. We use osmosis filtration because we want to get a very neutral water. We want to have nothing in the water but H2O, no mineral, nothing, to avoid to bring any cloudiness to the spirit or any other taste. If the reduction is done slowly, it will open the flavors. But if you add too much water at a time, you're going to get saponification in your spirit, and so you're going to get soapy taste, and you're going to lose many of the ester, which are aromatic flavors, aromatic esters. So what is very important is to go slowly in the reduction process. And the older the Calvados is, the more important it is to go slowly. So for the oldest vintage we have, we never drop more than 3 or 4% at a time. Otherwise, we're going to really spoil the vintage. On the younger Calvados, it can be a little bit faster, but it's important never, to do a big reduction just before the bottling, because then you're just going to kill your spirit.
Thanks.
Okay. So next week, I will be with my father. We're gonna talk about another subject, which is also of interest. I hope we're gonna talk about our range of vintages and the history of the company. We have a unique range of rare and old vintages. We have nearly every year from 58 to 2000. So my father will tell you how this range was created, the philosophy we have regarding all these old Calvados. And we'll come back on the history of the company, which was started by my grandfather. I hope everybody had a good time. I wish you all a good evening or a good day.